This is iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 949, brought to you by Excedrin Migraine Cure.
Didn't work, did it?
I don't know what I'm slurring. Migraine Cure. Oh. And iFanboy listeners like you. My name is Josh Flanagan, and this is my co-host, Conor Kilpatrick.
All right.
Oh, you can just feel tension escaping from me.
The week before the big one, we're going nuts.
This is iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 949. I have a stabbing pain behind my left eye. Let's do this. Every week, one of us picks the book they like best from their stack of comics. Fortunately, that guy does the pick of the week, and he talks for quite a while on his own, and you can just sort of sit here.
Maybe not this week.
If we're going to talk about that book-ish. Other books from the week, the Patron Pick, listener mail. It's a fun time. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please make sure that you go in your podcast app and set iFanboy to auto-download. It helps us out, and you don't want to miss the show. If you're like me, you'll just look up and be like a year later, be like, I haven't heard that show in a while, and it'll have been your fault. If you're listening on Pocket Cast, actually, technically, it's the app's fault.
Sure.
But, you know, we've given you the warning. It's on you after that. If you're listening to Pocket Cast, you can now give this show a rating.
Ratings.
You need to be subscribed and have downloaded a few episodes before you can rate it. So please take a couple of minutes, give us a nice rating, whatever's honest.
Give us a nice rating.
Okay, that's fine. So when I said rating, what do you think I did with my body at that point?
I mean, you pointed, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. Yeah. I stopped. I pointed to a hypothetical you as if it was your cue, and you did it. And that's amazing. That's a 3,000-mile blind cue.
And I was looking away from the screen, so it's even better that way.
I've told people, like, we don't look at each other. And some people haven't been around long enough to know that, like, because most people do these on camera now, even if they don't use the video.
Right.
And I was like, no, we can't do that. That's not going to work.
Most of the time I'm looking down at the comic anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but we do this completely out of audio cues now at this point. Yeah. There will be spoilers for the show. Conor, you had the pick.
I did, and it's funny because the pick of the week is The Amazing Spider-Man 953 or 59.
I forgot.
And 2 weeks ago, 952 was the pick of the week, 58. So this was the second to last book I read this week. And up until the point I read this book, I had a whole other book that I thought was probably going to be the pick.
I had a book that I thought you were going to make the pick.
So I get The Amazing Spider-Man, and I was about halfway through it, and I was like, fuck. Because it was the best comic from a comic book's point of view. Mm-hmm. But the reasons why it was the best comic are basically the same exact reasons why the last issue was the pick of the week. Because this is just kind of part two of what that was. And so this is how seriously we take it. I could have made this easy on myself and just gone with the other book. However, this was the best book, no matter what, no matter how annoying it's going to be for everyone to have the same conversation. But it was the best one.
It really is a production conundrum that you had to take a stand on one way or the other.
So last time we talked, Josh made it the pick, and it was all about this giant fight between Spider-Man and Tombstone, as Tombstone was going to go kill his daughter for betraying him. And it ended with this dramatic crash through a high-rise window as Tombstone and Spider-Man go spiraling out the window as they're fighting. And this is just the second part as they land and continue to fight their way across Manhattan, ending in a collapse on a subway platform. And just from a storytelling skills standpoint, nothing else came close to this book this week. Mm-hmm. This could have been entirely silent. There's a lot of dialogue. Not a lot, but there is dialogue throughout the fight.
There's steady dialogue. Yeah.
And it's good. And the whole thing where, at the end, he's like, why did you waste so much of yourself saving her? And he's like, I wasn't saving her. And it was a really good scene. He was saving him from killing his daughter. But you could take all of that out, and this would have just been an amazing issue of Spider-Man. It would have been an amazing fist fight. It's a brutal fist fight. It's one of those fights where we talk about with Romita where when he's on, you can feel it. I mean, these are two extremely strong guys, two extremely steady and invincible guys, and they're just taking blow after blow. Page 12, where Spider-Man is repeatedly hitting him in the gut, and it's just going whop, 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 whop with the sound effects, and we see the multiple fists, and it's just really incredible stuff going here. And the fight escalates, and a couple of times you think it's over, but it keeps going. And, there's a great scene where he's struggling to get on the subway that she's escaped onto, and Spider-Man keeps knocking him off, and he keeps getting on a different part of the subway. It was just incredibly well choreographed, well drawn, well written fight scene. That was part 2 of the other incredibly well written, well drawn fight scene. It was just the best comic this week.
It was like if the last episode of the show ended with them crashing out the window and like cut to black, and then this fades in from black, and they're now falling, having picked up from the same frame.
Right.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, and this is such good Romita.
Yeah.
I'm looking at vertical panels that are the entire page. I'm looking at splash pages. I'm looking at like grids. They're employing all the tricks of the trade here to do what Marvel comics are supposed to do. If you think back to how to draw comics the Marvel way and how to make panels dynamic, how to cant angles, or, going from the side to the top angle, all of them, the Marvel tricks that are in John Romita's blood are employed in this issue. And to an extent that we talk a lot lately, and we've gone through lots of different phases on the show and what we're into, what we're not into. Things change over the course of 19 years. Right now, we're into action. Give me the action. There's a lot of good comics this week that didn't feature any of the action.
Mm-hmm.
These are ultimately action-adventure books, and this one really brought it.
I think one of the things that I notice as I go through the whole issue is that everything is a close-up or maybe a medium shot. It's very claustrophobic. And if you look, there's almost no wide shots. Even when they fall out of the building, I mean, there's really an opportunity there if you wanted to sort of back up and show them against the backdrop of the city. But it isn't. The camera sticks with them the entire time. And there's other pages. So the page where Tombstone has them on the ground basically and is choking them out, like the camera keeps getting closer. It doesn't back away.
Right.
There's things in here which you would usually see a lot of these on an insert in a scene, but every panel is that. It's really funny. I just like to notice this. I'm on page 7, I think. No, 5. It's when they go into the subway, and at the top, she's running down the stairs. This is one of the only wide shots in the whole thing, just sort of show you that subway station is empty. But if you look up at the sign, it's just hand-drawn. Canal Street. Like, no one went in there and did it with, like digital letters. Yeah. They just hand drew it. And I was like, I like that. I like that choice. The whole thing's kind of raw like that. But even in that, there's all these close-ups. I mean, it's unusual. Same page. In the 4th panel, he grabs the back of her head. Like, everything is bleeding out of that frame.
Yeah. You're right. It's really intense. I didn't even consciously notice that, but that's what ratchets up the intensity, is that you're right in the midst of the fight with them. You're not watching it from a remove.
Right. And it's like one of those, when they say gritty, street level, you are down on the ground with them. The camera is never far. Like, the camera's usually close enough that if this was a camera and the character were to reach out, they would touch the lens. That's where we spend most of the time in this. And that is, we talk about storytelling a lot. And that's one thing to show you what happens from panel to panel, which is sort of the nature and definition of storytelling. But then this is a stylistic choice that most people, including myself, we're coming here to talk about the show. I hadn't really noticed it consciously, but as I'm looking at it, I was like, oh, look what he's done here. I mean, it should just give you a feeling, which it did for you and I. But then, like, well, why do we feel like that? Oh, look what this master is doing. Like, some people don't draw well, and some things are too close or not because they don't know what they're doing. That's not what this is. This is a choice. And you can see exactly why he made it. It's exactly the right choice.
Page 6 is the most New York panel ever, where she finally makes it into the subway to escape, and no one is paying attention to the fight outside.
Yeah, no, it's
woman's on her
100%
Kindle,
true.
other couples talking, people are just not getting involved.
Yeah. So on 5, the train looks relatively full. So I assume it was moving or whatever. I think it was going away. So this is maybe one of the ones in the back, or there's a smelly person on it, which is the only reason you have empty train cars in rush hour. But yeah, that one's pretty empty.
This was just terrific. There's not a ton more to say about it other than we're reaching the end of this Tombstone story. I mean, I'm guessing next issue is the 60th issue of Seb Wells' run.
They alluded to an ending of some kind.
Well, it's supposed to be concluded, right, at the end. So
yes, it does.
It said that before on the last arc when we thought that was in Seb Wells' run. But did he start with number 1? Did they give him a new number 1 when he came on? I can't remember. Either way, it's been 60 issues of this particular volume.
I think so, because they're coming out pretty...
every 2 weeks.
Pretty regular. I feel like this just came out last week.
I thought it did for a second, but it was 2 weeks ago.
One thing I noticed character-wise is that... What's her name? The Vulture Girl. No, not Vulture Girl. She's the
daughter?
Yeah. She's the Beetle. She was the Beetle, right? That was like her
I
thing.
think so. Yeah.
Like she had all of this swagger, and she was just fucking terrified in this.
I think with the last issue, she realized her dad wasn't fucking around.
Yeah,
People were
yeah.
mad at her before throughout this run, and yelled at her. And I think both she and Spider-Man realized that he was actually going to kill her.
But even so, she was like, well, I'm not fighting against this. And maybe that's because her dad, or maybe it's because like she knows he's a fucking psychopath, and she just thought, that'll never get pointed at me.
Mm-hmm.
That was a change in that character who had never been. She took over the family. She was not a wilting violet in any way. And in this, she's like, no, that guy's fucking terrifying. Let me ask you this: do you know what Tombstone's powers are?
I think he's just very strong. I don't know. Invulnerable skin? Clearly not. She scratched his face.
Let's see, powers. Because is he strong enough to chemically enhanced physiology? His body was exposed to the chemical Diox-3, which granted him all of his superhuman abilities. He possesses sufficient strength, enabling him to lift about 10 tons. And any comic book reader of a certain age will know that Spider-Man's strength is somewhere around. I'm sorry. This enables Tombstone to lift 6 tons. So
6
I
tons.
gave it away. Spider-Man was good for, I think, 10, maybe 8, but I think 10. He was a 10-ton guy. Do you remember this from the...
I don't remember that.
Oh, see, when I had the handbook to the Marvel Universe, I sort of knew where everybody was at. And now I only have, like, Hulk's like 60.
He's just a super strong, tough dude.
His reflexes are enhanced to superhuman levels. He has muscles produce less fatigue toxins. So he can exert himself at peak capacity for several hours before fatigue begins to affect him. And his body is highly resistant to physical injury. He's capable of withstanding high caliber bullets. That's a lot. Great impact force and temperatures as hot as 1200 Fahrenheit or negative 80 Fahrenheit without sustaining injury. He's also somewhat insulated from electricity. By his own account, his skin is as hard as diamonds, although his eyes aren't as durable. So he's tough. He's not as tough as... Actually, over here on the Marvelpedia, they have his intelligence, and I don't know what the scale goes to. They have his intelligence as a 1.
That doesn't make any sense. Unless 1 is Electro.
Well, there you go. His strength is 4, durability 5.
He does collapse of exhaustion at the end, so he's not,
Well, he was
not immune.
Spider-Man should be stronger than him. Like, it should be a tougher guy than him.
Right. But they are as strong as the story allows them to be. But I just thought this was terrific. We've been loving this run. This feels like the epic ending you want to an epic story like this. They're not shortchanging us on the final battle between the hero and the villain. Final being obviously relative.
I'm never allowed to go into these Marvelpedia things because it feels like the handbooks, but like endlessly. If you look up Spider-Man, there's just a list of the 1,000 Spider-Man versions over the years. I'm like, I just want Peter Parker. Where's he?
Absolute Batman, #1. The first of the new Absolute DC books from high-profile creators that take place on the alternate planet inspired by the evil of Darkseid, apparently, or whatever the hell that was in that issue. Scott Snyder, Nick Dragotta is the creative team here.
I'm very curious where this is going to go.
I thought this was good. I mean, look, it is essentially an Elseworlds book. It takes place in a different world. However, we know because they set it up in that special, and because they sent Booster Gold to the planet, and because they think this planet's a problem, eventually this is going to have to cross over with the other one. Whereas like Gotham by Gaslight, the next book we're talking about, is not going to cross over with the regular DC universe. So this is an Elseworlds book, but also we know eventually it's going to have to collide with the regular one. So who knows? But anyway, I love Nick Dragotta. Scott's done some really terrific Batman work over the years, especially the first couple of years of the rebooted New 52 stuff. And this was good, but I found myself just thinking, man, I just wish they were doing a regular Batman book in the regular DC universe, but I liked it.
I liked this a lot in the sense that I thought it was really well done.
It was really well done.
Super interested, like if you told me, hey, do you want to read a Batman in a worse place? I'd be like, not really. But first of all, this is one of those things where I was reading it, it was fine. And then I thought, wait a minute, who is drawing this? I went back, all right, Nick Dragotta, and I just thought, I haven't seen him in a while. He's excellent.
Yep.
Like this is really beautiful. Colors by
Frank Martin. This is some of the best stuff I've ever seen from him. I've been a fan of his forever.
Yeah, no, incredibly strong.
And the Frank Martin colors are really good too.
Yeah, like a whole package, and you can see like where there's little bits where it's pretty subdued, and then there's other times where like they use the color for emphasis, which is really an interesting way to go. And Jesus, like the drawing of Gordon, like look at him. That's a fucking fantastic Gordon. And then, all right, it's actually, I'm looking at page 19 of 45. Like, look at that room. That's just people. Great drawing of Gordon. That second and third panel of the guy in the audience yelling at him. Just the way that those are framed. You know, he's sort of coming in from off of the side, lots of negative space. I think it's filled with a water balloon. And then as you push in on the next one, I don't know, it's just wonderful. The same thing on the next two. They sort of push in, you know, on Bullock's nightstick and then his angry face and like those little bits of drawings, they just say so much. It almost feels like this is the kind of art where I could pick out something on every page and just notice something. Oh my goodness. Look at the steps. Look at page 25.
Yep.
Some really great Batman action. There's that weird split kick thing with the two faces going. That's wonderful. And then you got the Odessa steps.
It's not easy to do that kick when you're a thick boy like that.
Then look at the next page. Look at this layout.
Yeah.
This is not what Romita did. This is not how Dad did it. I'll tell you that much. Kirby would have been doing this eventually. The more I think, I kind of got through it and I was like, all right, here we go. The thing. And I was won over. There's enough differences going on here that it doesn't feel like we're doing it for no reason.
Right.
You know, this is a different Batman. This is a different Alfred. I don't want this necessarily all the time, but this bulky, giant Batman, it looks great. It's not stylistically the same as like Frank Miller's
Dark Knight. Yeah. Different kind of black.
But I've always loved that. I don't even mind the huge ears.
It does have huge ears, which are also weapons.
Huge Ears inked Captain Britain in 1986.
So in this world, his dad was a teacher. His mom was a social worker, worked in government. She's one of Gordon's aides. That's the big reveal at the end. His dad died in a mass shooting at a zoo. We took his class, including Bruce, and all of his childhood friends are all the villains. So Oswald and Edward and Harvey, and et cetera, et cetera. Alfred is a special forces type spy person who is not working for Bruce, but who is sent to Gotham to kill someone who we don't know, but is sidetracked by Batman.
He's got that late era indie circus body.
Gordon is running for mayor, and there's this gang that's just terrorizing the city. And, you know, part of the fun of the Elseworlds is to see the familiar that's different, but also see how it's still familiar. The whole conceit of the entire Absolute is kind of whatever, where all the heroes are not angrier, but they are all alone. They don't have their support systems, and Bruce is just a guy here. Doesn't explain how he's got all this stuff. Doesn't explain how he did all those jobs within 2 years of coming back from wherever he went.
Comic books.
And then the other big twist here is the traditional Bruce, the guy who goes around the world training with Ducard and the League of Assassins, etc., is the Joker. So that's kind of vaguely like Nemesis.
It all comes down to execution.
Absolutely.
I gotta say, like, Scott Snyder came out of the gate, got very popular, and got a lot of big books very fast. But he has, I think he's really, in this last sort of chunk of books. He's back, but also he's winnowed down his style. I think it could be said that he's been quite wordy in the past. And if you read through this, like, there's pages with not much dialogue on them at all. And that was the thing he never did.
Yeah.
He's really learned to sort of back up.
Also lots of fun ideas. Like,
yes, that's always been the case.
Bruce steals this sort of shotgun that Alfred had and modifies it to shoot tiny batarangs. That's a fun idea. Well, this is also a 5-issue arc, which,
great.
You know, back in the old days, 12 was sort of the smallest he ever went with Batman. 24 was sometimes normal. So, you know, we'll see. This is much more slam bang. Again, I don't love some of the base parts, but it's sort of an Elseworlds, and I'll get over it.
I'll tell you a thing that I like. I like that he didn't grow up with Alfred, and this is a somewhat different Alfred. It's really like, what if Alfred went this direction instead? Because it's not like he has this kind of background. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that he hadn't become a butler, which is quite a swing, by the way. And it wasn't like he was a special, like in the regular DC universe, it wasn't like he was hired like as a butler, air quotes, because he would be running operations at night. Like he went full into domestic service.
Yep.
From being a secret spy. Anyway, I like the idea that he is drawn to Bruce Wayne Batman. And I think that is a nice way of keeping a relationship alive and allowing one to form because they are just drawn to each other, which is nice to me. I think that's a good way to do it rather than they don't know each other, they hate each other. Like, that's the thing I noticed.
I went into it open-mindedly and it was definitely like, yeah, this will be interesting. And
I thought there was a chance you could make it pick of the week.
This one, no, I did like it. We'll talk about what I was going to make pick of the week next. So I really loved Batman Gotham by Gaslight, the Kryptonian Age, number 5. I think I've been loving this book more with every issue that comes by.
This was the best issue of the series so far, by far.
By far. Andy Diggle, Leandro Fernandez.
The first issue, I was like, I don't know, I kind of liked it, but I didn't think it was like, we talked about it. And then like the second one comes, like, I don't remember if I really like that. And you're right, each one more, but like this one, I just finished. I was like, wow, that was great. Like unabashedly.
This to me is exactly what an Elseworlds book should be. And it's slightly in contrast to Absolute Batman, which is not a knock on that book. But when the familiar people show up, they're different, but they're also kind of still them underneath it all. And so an Elseworlds book, I think, should present the characters you know in a different light. But at the end of the day, they should probably be mostly the same inside. And so we got a lot of elements here. We got Lex Luthor and his new assistant, Victor Stone, who we saw in the last issue, looking at this guy who's sort of trapped in stasis in this lightning field. Turns out that's Jay Garrick. And then there's a whole bit about how that came to be, which I thought was fascinating. And then we returned to Batman, which I sort of forgot about for a while. He builds this crazy like Zeppelin plane to fly around America. And I just loved when it takes off. And there's that silent page of it leaving Wayne Industries. And he's at the helm with the big wheel. And there's a cut in of his face giving a little smile. He loves this shit. Lex Luthor kills Vic Stone, kind of, but blows and becomes a cyborg.
Body horror.
All the different elements come together. And then I loved the John Constantine Phantom Stranger scene. Phantom Stranger's got the mustache, like the guy from Pale Rider. Then I really, really loved the Smallville sequence with Sheriff Clark Kent. Look at page 30, where Clark goes to confront the bad guys in the middle of town. And look at the progression and the comedic. We know he's fine when he gets shot.
Yeah.
He's talking to them in his earnest way. When we cut to the guns shooting, we cut to his legs wobbling, and we cut to his face smashing into the ground. It's a terrific progression.
Yeah.
But it's comedic for us because we know he's fine. But I just love the storytelling there. And then he gets up and he's okay. And he defeats, like, all the elements are there. And now we've got all these different characters going. We've got Superman, Batman, Jay Garrick's in there. We have Alan Scott in there. We have Cyborg. We have Lex Luthor. It's all sort of coming together. And we still don't know how because we're only in issue 5. I think this is 12 issues.
Nice.
They keep building out the world here, and I'm really enjoying it.
The only thing I did one page that was a problem here in this one. It was page 26. So it's the one where they're sort of starting to have the fight. I think Clark. No, it's not Clark. The guy's like step away from him, and then where they are is changing. I can't remember who any of the characters are, but there's the guy in the black, and he's like, "Making it my concern." It just I couldn't tell where anybody was on that page or who.
The guy in the black is Deadshot.
That's right.
The deputy is Pete. Then Lois and Jimmy are there because they're covering the story about Lex Luthor.
Yeah, no, like the three characters, I couldn't keep the geography of it straight. I went over it a bunch of times, and I thought it was going to be Superman and not Pete, so I was looking for him. And anyway,
I thought this was terrific. Really great Western stuff.
Leandro Fernandez, that other page notwithstanding, has never abused my affection for his work. Just a great artist and a guy who can't remember. He had the long noses, and he kind of got away from that. I think somebody's like, I don't think people like the long noses. I would have been fine to keep them.
Tone them down.
Yep.
I was fine too, but most people weren't.
Oh, yeah. It was so apparent because I was on Queen and Country when he first showed up, and then he did it for a while, and I was like, wow. And I was just like, I think that was just racism against the British.
I don't think the British are a race.
Well, they would. And the point is, he's like, little draw, there's disgusting long noses. How dare you be at war with my country for centuries?
Back to Scott Snyder and Duck and Cover number 2. This is the Comixology original now being published by Dark Horse, so we got a double-sized issue here.
This is like the third or fourth of these series that he just...
Of the Comixology, yeah. I really like this, even though I really had a hard time remembering the specifics of the characters.
Yes.
I remember the situation they were all in. I remember them being on the desks. I remember us talking about it. And I remember all that. But then it was like, wait, why does she hate him? And why does he hate her? Like, I just trying to remember the interpersonal. I couldn't really. It was tough.
It took me most of the issue to pick that up. And for some reason, I don't think this is true. I feel like I read the last issue a long time ago.
I think it was a while ago.
One of the other books that we talked about was similar to this. I forget, it was one of the last pick of the weeks, maybe, where I was getting it a little mixed up. I was like, wait, there was the book about the kid who wanted to get out of his town.
It was 5 episodes ago, so it was 5 weeks ago.
I mean, that's a long time. It's a long issue, and there's like everything else is coming out every couple of weeks. Whatever. In a lot of ways, this is very similar to a lot of other books that have been coming out. It's this end of the world scenario. In this, it's a other dimensional invasion or monsters, and we don't really know. Been a couple of War of the Worlds kind of books that have come out lately, or that Kelly Thompson book where they had all the monsters invade that dimension that they were in. They're all very sort of similar. What I think was nice in this is that it is done against the solid backdrop of the 50s Cold War.
Yep.
It's called Duck and Cover. And so, it's a way to bring to tangibility the fear of, the Russians and the Soviets. And I don't know, it's one of those things where we talk about this a lot where, the story isn't all that different from other things that are out there. There's probably 5 Image books that are very similar to this, but Scott Snyder is better at making comics than most of those people.
And Raphael Albuquerque, who's doing, I think, terrific job here.
That would be my final point, is that this is fantastic Raphael Albuquerque. And, there was a while when he was on American Vampire and wow, this is one of the greatest new guys around. And then he'd show up on other stuff and I didn't always love it. It was good or what, but I feel like maybe he was experimenting with how to do this. He could do it really well. And he's like, all right, how can I make it easier? What would be better? Changing around. But I think that on this, he's landed on a style that works really well. And, maybe it's just him and Scott, sometimes work best with the guy you're best with.
And they were doing a lot of period pieces with American Vampire, and this is another one that works well. I love the explanation for why the desks. I mean, I didn't need an explanation for why the desks saved people, but I liked it.
Yeah.
I was fine with it just being a thing in this world where being under a school desk for whatever reason saved you from the attack. Here, we find out the blonde girl's family are Russian spies like the Americans. They uncover a film reel of the parents explaining everything, and they found some messages from aliens that were carved into whales, and through all that, they found some messages. They were given some alloy in the blood of the whales, and the alloy was put into metal, and part of the metal of the desks creates this protective magnetic field. So if you're duck and covering like they were and like the radio DJ was, then you were saved from the alien attack. Why? Because they want to use the kids of the world as labor as they take over. It's an alien invasion. I just thought it was fun.
I like the Wolfman Jack stand-in. Because that was the thing, is that he's like, I thought you were this guy. He's like, I'm all of them. And I was like, oh, that's what Wolfman Jack did. That's great. Just living out in this shack in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. It's a really good series. And then a bunch of them have been. There was that one. There
was the firefighter prisoner one. There was the serial killer.
Those are IDW. One. So these are the ones that came over from.
There was a Western one I think I fell off of that Dan Panosian was drawing.
I finished it. Yeah.
I think I missed the end of that one.
Yeah. But I mean, overall.
He has the Dark Spaces one at IDW, and he has these Comixology ones.
I started to read one about the kid who is a genius, and I fell off at that one.
The ones I've been reading, they've all been really fun and inventive.
Yep. And different.
And when you combine that with Absolute Batman, I think he's...
I gotta say, there's so many examples of a lot of these creators, specifically writers, who in the midst of the pandemic were like, fuck it, let's throw some shit on the wall.
Right.
You've seen it with Scott. You see it with Jeff Johns. You've seen it with Tom King. The period that came after that is pretty impressive. And just sort of we'll do these other things too.
Pretty great. We don't really pay attention to the news anymore.
Comics news.
However, I think I knew Mark Waid was taking over Action, but I think I forgot. So that when I opened it up, because we just had the really fun Gail Simone run, then we had the really fun Jason Aaron run before that. I think I was expecting another thing like that, but now we're back into All In. So it's a new era of Action that Mark Waid's doing. And Mark Waid, we've been talking for years about wanting him to write a regular Superman book. He's been writing World's Finest, but that's sort of a team-up DC Universe book. This is a straight-up Superman story. And Clayton Henry on art. This is the main story. There's a backup we'll talk about in 1 second. But man, I thought this was delightful.
It was occurring to me that we really had a lot of, if not great, really interesting and quality ongoing Superman for a really long time. And it's just sort of end up at this point where you're like, and Mark Waid's going to be on it. And listen, we can sing Mark Waid's praises, and we have many times, and you're probably possibly sick of it. But if there is a character who that man is meant to write, it's Superman. I mean, I've heard him talk about the vagaries of the different colors of kryptonite, in a way that you're like, well, geez, you need to be doing this. And here he is. But I think it will be surprising this isn't a Silver Agey kind of Superman like he's doing in the other book.
It's kind of a mix, though. I mean,
it is. No, it's
gold kryptonite does save the day.
It's true. But at the same time, there's this other sort of story going on with Supergirl that is pretty hardcore and pretty dramatic.
Yeah, well, that's the backup with Mariko Tamaki.
Right, no, that's true. Sorry, I was flipping through it.
I mean, she is in this main story, and she is a bit more dour. I don't love that, but let's talk about her in a second. I mean, it does have the body horror, which is apparently a thing running through all of comics. I guess we all went through a pandemic in which we all were afraid of dying, and now
I guess maybe that must be it.
But here, somebody escapes from the Phantom Zone projector, and it's 3 dudes who have infused into one, so they've got all the limbs, and it's a very disturbing image.
They're Kryptonians, so it's Superman times 3.
So he's got to fight them. He's not having a great time with it. And eventually realizes he's got to go get the gold kryptonite, which is the most dangerous kryptonite in the universe because it takes away your powers permanently. And Jimmy saves the day. It's not a one and done. This story continues on, but I thought as a chapter that was basically one and done, I thought this was a terrific little Superman story.
I mean, it didn't feel like here's a bold new era of Superman. You know, it felt like the next issue, just as a different writer on it.
Did the kids leave?
They mentioned them all at some point.
But because at the end, the family shows up at the fortress, so it's Kong and Jonathan and Connor and Supergirl and Krypto and Natasha.
Look at that.
And Lois, but I don't see any kids anywhere.
Maybe, I mean, Mark Waid knows a thing or two about introducing kids, and then
he was the first.
Knowing it is a mistake.
We're still saddled with them.
If you ever want to know if somebody's fallible, then all you need to know is about Jay and Iris. Is she like Iris Jr.? Whatever it is. Iris.
I think it's
Irie, man.
I think it's Irie. So in the story ends where Superman has to go into the Phantom Zone to figure out A, how they got out, and B, how they got fused and what's going on in there, which is great. And then the second story from Mariko Tamaki and Skylar Patridge, an artist I've never heard of, but is fucking terrific.
Mm-hmm.
The Supergirl story in which we find out she was one of the recipients of one of the mystery powers from DC All In. She basically can Zatanna you. She can make you forget. Which is fucking dark. I know it's been a while that they've decided they'd make Supergirl the edgy, dark, angry one, but I don't like it. That's not a knock on this story, which I thought was terrific, and an all-female creative team, but I just don't like that in general.
She was like a teenage character for a long time, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is sort of the maturation into adulthood, which can be kind of rocky for some people, especially if you happen to be, you know, the second most powerful human being on the planet. There's a place for it. Now, the other thing, you know, I've known Mariko Tamaki's name for a while. I'd read a bunch of books that didn't really make an impact on me. But between the Zatanna book that's going on right now and this, is like 2 very strong bits of writing.
Yeah, this was good.
That I've really enjoyed.
This issue was very good. This would have been like my 3rd place issue of the week.
It was good. Obviously, what Action Comics is now is, you know, sort of, I don't even know, it's kind of a backup, but I think both stories are the same-ish length. So it's sort of, you know, you get half of an issue of 2 different things like they used to do it. It's what Action Comics was. Action Comics was an anthology in a way.
Yeah, for a long time, yeah.
Yep.
Wes Craig variant cover. I'm glad he's getting some DC money.
What did he draw this? He drew something else this week.
He did Deadly Class for like 10 years.
No, I know, but like I've seen him on...
Oh, he just did the second half of All In, which you forgot to read for the show.
Right. There was something else I saw him on, but maybe it's just this cover. Either way.
He's been doing a lot of variant covers. Get him some DC money. I feel like you talked about Space Ghost #1.
I did talk about Space Ghost #1, and I think the reason that I'm checking in here...
Wasn't it a dark version of Space Ghost? Like a serious version?
It's not dark as much as it is just like a dramatic sci-fi. You know what I mean? Like
a serious take on Space Ghost.
Yes. Okay, so we're on Space Ghost #6. They've all shown up. Moltar, Brack, Zorak, the whole deal.
Is there singing?
No.
Oh, man.
What time a monkey did it? Anyway, I cannot exactly explain to you why I'm still reading this.
Right.
I liked the animated series well enough. You know, I'm not a super fan, but I'm very familiar with it, and I watched it.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of it, maybe not regularly. And before that, I really didn't really know. Like, I've never read Toth's Space Ghost or whatever it is. And I mean, it is an image. The design of that character is seared in my brain from the moment I've ever saw it because it's one of the most fantastic superhero designs ever. But it is interesting to read this book, which is pretty good, as it tries to do a semi-serious version of what is essentially an action cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's well done. It's done dramatically. Most of this story was told through Jace's point of view.
I don't remember who Jace is.
There's 2 kids, basically. There's 2 like orphans that hooked up with Space Ghost because he saved them after their parents were killed. Yeah, Jason, Jana, I think. Yeah, not the cartoon series one, but like the... anyway... This is actually a real, like, so he was basically in the last stories, and this is the short part I know.
Oh, I see. They were, yes, I remember them. They were in the, like, the Hanna-Barbera, like,
yes,
cartoons, yes. Jason, Jan, and Blip. They were the Wonder Twins.
He went after, yes. I almost called them the Wonder Twins a second ago. He went after
they have a monkey
Zorak.
too.
Yeah.
Blip.
Yeah, he's in this too. Main character. So they went after Zorak after Space Ghost was like, you can't. This guy is pure evil. It's really dangerous. And Jace ended up having to kill Zorak. And so the beginning of this is him just being like, man, Space Ghost will not talk to me. He's so angry and I feel really bad about it. And he's just like, I can't do any adventures or whatever. And they go through the whole thing. And Space Ghost has been this like really gruff, not saying anything to anybody, the Batman kind of character. At the end, he was like, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at myself. I should have never let you get in danger like that. I didn't protect you. That's my job. You know, It's not Pulitzer Prize winning, breaking the world stuff, but it was pretty well done. I find it interesting to see you can overdo this kind of thing. I think we've read things where you want to do a character who, you know, was kind of silly in the past and kind of do it, but they overshoot it. It's too serious. You could easily see this done as a cartoon that takes itself seriously. You know what I mean? Like we had those dramatic action cartoons. It's interesting. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's great, but I am drawn to it for ways I can't understand fully.
So David Paposi, the art writer?
Yeah, I don't.
He did that Savage Avengers book that we enjoyed that had Conan the Barbarian as the lead character.
I've seen his name around over the years.
Yeah, he's been around. He did the new Punisher book, which wasn't his fault that the idea is dumb. Or maybe it was.
Well, we don't know that.
Yeah, it could have been his fault, but we didn't like it. Sorry, David. I'm scrolling through his website. He's done a lot of stuff. A lot of Marvel work.
Yeah, he's a yeoman.
He's good. How's the art?
It's good. It's serviceable. It's, you know, sci-fi fantasy, you know, with a sort of a cartoon bent. It's not...
Jonathan Lau.
I feel like I know that name, too. It's what it needs to be. In fact, it's actually pretty good. I'm trying to think of who to compare it to. It's sort of in the realm of like all those DC Batman guys for a while. Like mid-2000s, those DC guys, the Jason Fabok school. You know, like that kind of thing. It's a little in that.
Right.
Like a Jim Lee descendant. Really is kind of what it kind of looks like. But it doesn't look janky. It's not like, you know, sometimes on a Dynamite book or something, you'll be like, oh, you went with the B team because of money. It's not that. It's professional level. It's got a lot put into it. There's some good stuff. We're talking about Space Ghost a lot longer than I planned to.
Scarlett, number 5, the final issue of the Scarlett miniseries. I would hope they can find a way to have Kelly Thompson stick around the Energon universe. Because this mini's been terrific. This is not the final issue before we start the G.I. Joe series. We still have one more issue of Destro to go, I think. That's not been a good series. We're not talking about Destro. We're talking about Scarlett, where we find out a couple things. One, the sword they liberated in the last issue is powered by Energon.
Hello.
So that's a problem. And then Scarlett has to basically keep her cover identity in Arashikage rather than alert them that they've been infiltrated, and therefore they would go underground and they'd never be seen again. So she is not able to go back with Snowjob. I almost said lift ticket. He flies the helicopter. She's got to stay undercover and pretend to be one of them. And we just talked about this with Elseworlds books. You know, it's a new take, so things are similar, but they're different. And how are they different? Well, this time it seems that I'm basically no evidence other than my gut that Storm Shadow is much more of a bad guy, because he's not at all a bad guy in the original series. We meet him, he's a member of Cobra, but like 2 issues later, it's revealed he's undercover. He's always been a Joe, or at least on the side of the Joes. And here it seems much more like he is kind of a Destro figure, which is ironic. I thought for a second that he had killed the Hard Master at the end. On page 21, where he holds up the sword, and they're all chanting Arashikage, and then there's a close-up of eyes. They're Scarlett's eyes, but I thought for a second they were the Hard Masters and he was being stabbed, but it wasn't the case. But this has been dynamic and fun.
I can see that.
Marco Ferrari art was
Fantastic.
really great, really action-packed. Everything moved very well. Great character design, great world building. Sometimes fisheye lens used to make things more exciting.
See on page 13.
Yeah.
When they fall out of the building. That was what I was talking about with Spider-Man. Like they could have done a thing like that where they're falling out of the building and they're tiny images against it. Because people do that all the time. And they chose not to do that. Whereas here it makes sense to sort of show the scale, the Tom Cruise-like stunt that they do here.
Right.
Very dramatic.
Cobra Commander shows up, shoots Scarlett in the arm.
God, look at him. Look at the spats. This is just...
The arrogant pose.
Oh, what a ridiculous outfit. But they were like, no, we're going to do it exactly like you're used to seeing. We're not messing with his outfit because it is perfect.
The Duke Mini was great. Scarlett was great. Cobra Commander was pretty well done by the time we got to the end. Destro's been the only misfire. It's going really well for G.I. Joe right now.
Yeah, G.I. Joe 1's on the way.
So there we go.
It's coming. Hey, if you like what you're hearing, you can help support the show directly. Unlock shows for everybody, become a part of a great community on Discord and Facebook, and you can come to the monthly Patron Hangout, and that's patreon.com/iFanboy. You probably know what Patreon is, but it's a great way to help support the show. It makes a huge difference for us. We thank the people who do it, and if you've been thinking about it, please do so. That would help us out, and we would appreciate it. There's iFanboy.threadless.com. That is our merch store. There are 13 designs that we have accumulated over the years, and then stuck at that number for some time. because you can't rush greatness. Also, very tired. You can get those designs on t-shirts or items, or do they have a wallet? Can you get a wallet?
That's a great question.
I bet you can.
I don't know the answer.
Get yourself signed up, by the way, for the threadless emails, and that way you'll know when they go on sale. Just hack the system that way.
Just a sale that just happened.
Yep. iFanboy.com/support has a direct donation via PayPal link. Connor, where does that money? I've never heard of that money. Do you have that money?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I know you don't like dealing with money, and I just deal with it. You don't need to worry about it. It's fine. It just seems ironic that we talk about this, and then all of a sudden you have a fur hat. Hold on, I got a ring for my butler. Hold on a second.
That's fine.
He's got to bring me a cognac.
Spider-Man #1 was a really good issue, and
he's in the other wing of the house right now.
I just hear that bell, and I automatically want to give a capsule review. iFanboy.com/Amazon has your general shopping via the general link. Is that what it say? General shopping via the general link. That's a bad sentence.
Wow. Who copy edited this?
Has it been like that for years?
Probably.
I've never seen it. iFanboy.com/Amazon you can use to just get to Amazon, and it lets us get a piece of what you're ordering, costs you nothing. That's very good for you to do. I'll just put it that way. If you wanted to take that link and bookmark it and have it be your Amazon link, I'm not gonna complain. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna tell you not to do that.
Neither will my butler. He's looking for healthcare this year.
You know what? These service people, they ask too much.
Also, he doesn't like that I call him Alfred. It's not his name, but it was a condition of the employment. He knew that when he signed up. Bookshop.org is an aggregate of local bookstores where you can order books. Here's the thing. We promised to get to the email this week, and we are going to do it. All right. Well, this is as much my fault as yours. I'm not saying it's your fault. I know. I was blaming you. It could be my fault. You'll find those links on the site where appropriate. Let's carry on with this patron pick. At patreon.com/ifanboy, every patron gets a vote to add a book to the rundown. And this week, by an overwhelming margin, despite the fears of some in the community, the winner was the Toxic Avenger #1. What were the fears? Everyone assumed it was going to be Absolute Batman, so they were like, I'm not voting this week. It's going to be Absolute Batman. And this is the thing. Always vote. Your vote always counts. The Toxic Avenger was the surprise winner by 2-1 margin over Absolute Batman. Anyway, this is from Ahoy Comics, written by Matt Bors, art by Fred Harper. These are all the names you give to people who are on the Witness Protection Program. Colors by Lee Lowridge, letters by Rob Steen. Josh. Yes, sir. We are children of the 80s, and the Toxic Avenger came out in 1984. The famous film from Tromaville, yep. Troma Entertainment was the company behind it. I thought Tromaville was the studio. Tromaville's the town. Right, I know, but I think it was also the name of the studio that made not just the one film, but several. I may be wrong. Well, maybe it was just Troma Entertainment. I don't know if they were called Tromaville or not. What I do know is that at least in the early 2000s, they always had quite a loud booth at the San Diego Comic-Con. Headquartered in Long Island City. Troma Entertainment, Long Island City. That makes sense. So, yes, the point being, I am aware of it. Did you ever see it? No. Maybe. I don't know. Like, I was kind of aware of it. I wasn't all that interested in it. I saw it once. In the 80s, it's one of those things. It was, if you traveled I read comics and, hang out in comic stores and, into movies and read movie magazines, you definitely know of the film, even if you're slightly too young in that time. But I definitely remember my friends and I getting it somehow. Not like it was hard. It wasn't like X-rated or anything, but no. However we got it, either we rented it or whatever, and watching it, I think the one time... And that was it. I have a vague recollection of the story. I went back and read the plot recap just to refamiliarize myself. I was like, oh, right, I kind of remember that. It's very different from this book. But I wouldn't say I was a huge fan, but I definitely saw it as a kid. Thing. It was part of the culture. The other thing is that every era has its fears. And after the Cold War in 3 Mile, like as part of that whole thing, we got, as a culture, very obsessed. And by the way, not incorrectly. Nor should we have ever stopped obsessed with toxic waste. It's everywhere. Yeah, and like that was a thing. You know what? Actually, sidebar, I just finished Neil Stephenson's second book, Zodiac, which I had Zodiac, yep, I remember that. Which is
1988, and it's about toxic waste. And sword toxic fighting. Waste and and Satanists. And I was like, that's pretty 1988.
Satanic Panic and Toxic Waste Panic.
So I was aware of it. I wasn't really a fan. I didn't really feel one way or another. I was never into like the sort of that low budget. It was kind of a horror movie. They're a lot like
it's a low budget horror comedy.
Roger Corman. It's kind of a Roger like Troma is like an East Coast Roger Corman kind of thing. It's that I don't want to say aesthetic, but it's that mindset of we're gonna make ultra low budget movies the way we want to make them, and we're gonna lie, cheat, and steal to be able to do it. I respect it. So anyway, this book, like I said,
bears no resemblance to the film. In the film, the Toxic Avenger was sort of a nerdy janitor at a health club who got bullied into falling into a vat of toxic waste and became a Toxic Avenger. And there was a bunch of crime that he got involved. Like, no resemblance to what happens here, which is told backwards, starting on quarantine day 4 and then going backward 3, 2, 1, which I didn't like.
Was a mistake.
The device, because I was very confused and I thought I had missed an issue somehow, even though it was issue 1.
That is exactly what I was going to say, is that it only became clear at the end that I hadn't missed anything. So the idea is that basically they start you, this is comic book stuff all the time, time shifting, is that you know there's going to be an event that happens at the end of the issue, but the event that happens at the end of the issue is that Toxie, that's what it was made into what he is. And from the beginning, I just thought, oh, he's already Toxic Avenger. We're going to go from here. Cool. I'm fine with that. So I felt like I was going backwards, and we were going backwards, but I mean in the bad narrative sense.
Yeah.
I thought it was bad structure. And if you had done it the other way around, I think it would have been clearer and more enjoyable.
I liked the Fred Harper, who was clearly in the Witness Protection Program, living in Ohio, working at a post office, but was once in the mob. His art reminded me at times of Richard Corbin.
What I would tell you about it is that I think that the art...
Richard Corbin's an all-time great, not to that level, but I thought it had qualities of Richard Corbin in it. Lee Lowridge might be part of that.
Lee Lowridge really helped here, but I think that Corbin's part of it, but it's a little... like it kind of reminds me of... I'm trying to think, like Sam Keith a little bit.
Maybe.
There's sort of a 90s, 2000... like indie comics sort of thing. You know what this book was, actually, then now that I think about it? This was somebody, I'm not saying they're doing Mark Russell, but this was a Mark Russell type book without Mark Russell type skill.
The story here is that a corporation, they had a train full of toxic waste and it derails in this New Jersey town, and they're doing all they can to cover up the fact that a bunch of teenagers, including the Toxic Avenger, got exposed and turned into mutants. And part of the problem with it being backwards is early on, there's a press conference and the woman from the corporation is doing all the talking, and the reporters are saying, Mayor Bryce. Mm-hmm. And so I thought she was the mayor. Mm-hmm. She's not.
She was really well written. I liked that press conference scene a lot. Like the bullshit corporate speak. That was the Mark Russell, like that's when I was like, oh.
I'm struggling with this book because I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't care about or for it. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. I think the art was excellent. And just right away, I think the art was exactly what it needed to be. Having Lee Lowridge, on this does not hurt. He's a master. I was like, whoa, a nice pull. When your colorist is like easily the best name on there, that's not terribly usual, but it makes a huge difference. This is a perfect example of, wow, look how a colorist can, make a book.
Right.
But the art was fantastic. I think it was exactly what it needed to be. I think that it just same thing I said earlier. I never really cared. Like, I get it. I know what it is. It's just not quite my.
Yeah, even in the 80s, I remember, I was like, that was fine. Like, I'm glad I saw it as part of a cultural thing, but I never thought about it.
I don't hate it, but I have no affection for it.
Right.
Wherever they get to day one, like you see them, him and the girl are the freaks, and he's like, I'm going to do what I want.
They're bullying her for having glasses on, which. Yeah.
She's clearly a cute blonde girl,
I mean, even the 80s wasn't really a thing.
This isn't the 80s because there was this.
Right, but I'm saying even in the 80s,
right?
Sure, people with glasses sometimes got made fun of, but they're really going at her just for having glasses. I was like, is there something else that they think is wrong with her? Nope, they just think she's good.
That kind of bully, though, is in keeping very much with the 80s movie aesthetic. There was the 80s were full of those kind of bullies.
Yeah, but she's also like long-legged and.
Yep. Well, but that's also the aesthetic of the movie, is that all the girls in the movies were sexy. Yeah. Didn't matter what part. It's about believing that thing. I think this is just all the aesthetic of the thing, and I don't know. I just don't care.
It wasn't bad. I don't want to say that. Although I think the structure, as we said before, was a bad choice.
Yes,
but I don't think the book was bad. I think the art was good, and so I'm going to give this book a 2.75 out of 5.
I'm going to go so far as to give it a 3. I think if not for the structure misstep, which, it is a choice, I think it would have read better otherwise. It would have done exactly sort of what they wanted to do with this. And I'd be curious. Well, not really, because I'm not going to look into it. But if you're a fan of Toxic Avenger, is this one of the things where we're like, oh, this was totally wrong? Or is like, no, it was really fun. I was glad to see it. Right. Well, I don't know, because I don't know any Toxic Avengers fans. I know they exist, and I know they're 60.
Question number 2, would you have read this if it wasn't the pick?
No.
No, I would not have. And are you sticking with it?
No.
But you know what? I'm not mad about having read it.
If you are curious and you're like, I kind of liked that, I think it is worth your time.
I really liked discovering Fred Harper.
Mm-hmm.
Vinny the Nose, probably his real name. I liked the tactile nature of his art quite a bit.
He probably thinks that you should get out of the freezer section.
Because you don't want to melt all the stuff.
He's going to melt all of this stuff on account of, if you really like, by the way, it's worth checking out for the artist if you like this kind of art. This sort of, I think it's Sam Keithy. That's what it made me think of. Okay. Or finally, if you're a Lee Loweridge fan, he's doing fantastic work in this.
Yeah, really good. Patreon.com/iFanboy. Every patron gets a vote to add a book to the rundown, but any patron gives it the $5 or higher level per month gets a superpower live on the show, like Andrew Myers, who can enter a room or a space that Andrew is in and absorb all of the dust in that room into his body, like a tree would absorb carbon dioxide. And then Andrew can, if he chooses to, release it at a later date in like a stream of dust. So he can clean up your house. No dusting needed. He'll absorb all of it. But if you need to obfuscate something later on, he can create a cloud of dust.
Oh, good. He's good around Halloween.
Yeah.
If you're going to decorate. Dust is just this undefeatable just like, it's just going to be there. You won't win.
He'd be a terrible villain for anyone like me with dust allergies.
That's true.
By the way, dust allergies is a great way of not having to clean anything. I got them. I have serious dust, really, really bad dust allergies.
Yes, you do. I have annoying dust allergies, so I have to clean anyway.
I will occasionally forget and sort of wipe away something with my hand and like, oh, fuck.
The ironic part is that it's mostly you. It's mostly your old skin, which you're allergic to, which is really, that's kind of a cruel celestial trick, isn't it?
It's true. I'm just shedding my own source of pain. Thanks, Andrew. Patreon.com/iFanboy. You can become a patron today. $5 or higher and get a superpower live on the show. I was going to say a dumb one, but they're not dumb.
No.
They're not dumb. So now this email from Ken J.
If you have a lot of Legos around, I mean, that's a quality power.
It's true. I've got a lot of figures.
Yeah, they're impossible.
They're all super dusty. Ken J. from the Great White North. We've had this email in our script for 3 weeks in a row now. And it just so happens we've gone long 2 weeks in a row. Ken J. from the Great White North. Hoping for a little praise for the journeyman. This is a perfect email for this episode. Who was the first colorist that you ever took note of? How about letterer? Editor. So editor's easy. I think everyone's first editor was Stan Lee, or at least in like the idea of it. He may not have been actually editing at the time, but he was the first person I think most comic readers knew of as an editor.
I think that's true, but I think it's...
I think from our age. I'm not talking about people like in their 20s now, but in the 80s.
I feel as if the intent of the question is, who did you like notice? Oh, this person does books that I like. And I think Stan Lee is sort of an obvious person we know. But was there a point where like you're like, oh, this editor, I like
See, I don't take the question that way. I just think the question is, who did you ever notice? Because like, when you're reading comics as a kid, most don't really go deep into the creative team page. You know, it's like who wrote.
I knew because they would have I remember like there was a little drawing of Jim Salicrup.
Right, sure. Well, Marvel was great at that. They created a whole basically proto-reality show around their office. Yeah. If Marvel came about now, it would be a reality TV show. That was the instincts that Stan Lee had to create an environment around.
Instead, they just do a superhero. So it's just a superhero reality show.
I think Colors is tough because Colors comes along much later. Because for so long in our comic reading lives, the Colors was just doing flats. They didn't really even put their names in the lineup. If they did, it was in the other part with like the executives. They weren't really part of the team. And so for me, if
I have an answer for this.
Honest, the first person I really remember as a colorist from the creative team list was Laura Martin.
Same one.
That was the first time really.
Laura Dupuy
and then Martin, right?
Yep.
She was the first colorist whose name I really that's a name I recognize from issue to issue.
And it didn't hurt that it went along with, for you and me probably, is The Authority with Brian Hitch and John Cassaday and Planetary. And I think that to his credit, Warren Ellis definitely made an effort to credit her.
Once digital comes in and it was a rough couple of years, but once the artistry of the colors became apparent, then the movement became to put them on the cover and they became a name that you knew. But for the 80s and the 90s, most comics I read, I couldn't tell you who colored them. It wasn't until 2000 or so, late 90s, 2000, that really I started noticing color.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and adjust that because the first colorist who I was actually aware of, it was Lynn Varley.
You're right. You're right. That's probably technically accurate. But I think on a week-to-week basis, it's Laura Martin. But you're right.
But one of the reasons that I think that you say you don't remember a specific color is because all the books look the same. The colors were
Because
pretty,
they were flat
the
colors.
color, right? But they were also just all sort of in like there was like a standard coloring they used, and they didn't really use that as a medium in the regular issues that much. I'm sure there was special stuff where they did one way or another. And so, at a very young age, I did read, Dark Knight Returns, and I thought, well, this looks so cool,
Right.
which was in stark contrast to when the Strikes Again came out. You're like, whoa, this is the same person. Why does this look like this? It almost helped make the earlier stuff look even better. But I think she's probably the first one.
Yeah, it's almost only because I read that Dark Knight Returns straight a million times, so I knew the entire team.
Yeah.
But
I definitely did recognize that was an early one of like, oh, that color's really good. And you could tell.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that Klaus Janson was the reason that it looked so much of the way it did. No,
Right.
I don't even mean in a bad way, but I just
that's
like
right.
now,
That's exactly right.
Now when you see Klaus Janson, you're like, oh, I didn't know enough to give inkers credit, but now I know.
Well, let's slightly modify this to add inker as well, because an inker is definitely someone who I would start to notice more as a kid. So people like Klaus Janson or Terry Austin or Scott Williams were names that I was like, oh, I know that John Byrne and Terry Austin worked together, even if I didn't quite understand what that meant.
Yeah, but I gave all the credit to John Byrne.
Absolutely, but at least I knew the name, though. I definitely knew the name.
If I'm going to be honest about this, I think probably Jimmy Palmiotti was the first inker that I really noticed, or around the same time. Is it Rodney Ramos who did Transmetropolitan?
Yes.
Yeah. And in both of those cases, it took me seeing those same artists being colored by different people. So Joe Quesada.
Or inked by different
people, I mean, or certainly Derek Robertson being inked by somebody else or himself. And then by contrast, you'd be like, oh, look at this inker's bringing to it. God, I really do appreciate inkers. We don't see them anymore, but if we did, you would notice a jump in the art, I think.
We had Scott Hanna today we should have mentioned Amazing Spider-Man. The inking really does improve John Romita's work.
Yeah. Danny Mickey.
Yep.
Yeah. They make a huge difference.
Letters are tougher, but it's almost the same era as the colors, but I think I did recognize Tom Orzechowski in Spawn in the early 90s. I think that's a name I did know because the lettering was so insane in that book.
I would say this is a sort of a second era when I came. I recognize names, but I didn't really it was just a name. It was like watching the credits on a movie. Like, I've seen that name.
Right.
But I would say that in terms of like, oh, this person is different and better. Richard Starkings and Comicraft. I remember when, I think those are probably relatively early digital letters.
Yeah.
Kurt Busiek's Astro City. Like, they looked better. Like, the lettering was better. Like, it was really good. And then later when I really it's like, oh, lettering is good. Then, you can recognize your Todd Kleins or your John Workmans. John Workman has the best font.
Yeah, I think it's Orzechowski.
Orzechowski, I would think.
Orzechowski. Well, who knows? And Klein from the same era. But I just remembered his name because it was so unusual and the lettering was so nuts. And then for me, it becomes the early 2000s where we start doing iFanboy and we start really looking at the comics in a different way. And you start appreciating letters and you start seeing a bunch of people in Chris Eliopoulos and then everybody. But yeah, so the first one is I'm just going to say Orzechowski. So then editing is tough. I think it's probably Shooter for me. But again, that's the whole Marvel thing of turning all their behind the scenes people into characters. And so in the 80s reading comics, Shooter was the editor in chief and his name was all over the comic. So I think that's probably it. Probably Jim Shooter.
I can tell you, I don't know. Like I said, like I said, like Jim Salicrup. Like for some reason, I always remember that name, but I didn't really know what they do, and they didn't stand out. If I had to go to sort of modern or later era, as I'm starting to understand comic books and going, this person's the talent. Karen Berger, a bunch of the people at I always recognized their names and I followed those names.
Right.
And then what's his name from America's Best Comics and then IDW, and he just left. Scott Dunbier. Scott Dunbier is one of the first guys where I was like, oh, this person only edits great books.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go, Ken. Thank you for letting us talk about. We like talking about our old memories.
And being patient. We don't do this a lot where we hang on to a question.
We really like the email though.
Yes.
And that's what happens. That's what happens. We never forget you. We want to hear from you. Contact@ifanboy.com. If you want to get on the show or our Media Splode show, you can put Media Splode in the subject line. And that's a great segue into this coming week. It's Pick of the Week 950. This is 949. So it follows at 950 is the next episode. We're doing that live. The live stream recording is going to happen Friday, October 18th. We're going to start around 6 p.m. We probably won't go right into the show, but we'll start the feed around 6 p.m. Goes about 3 hours. We'd love to have you there. It's always fun when a lot of people show up and hang out in the chat room and try to distract us from the show. So hopefully you can come down and check it out. The links will be posted on our social, on ifanboy.com. but it's our YouTube page. There'll be a live stream there. All the information we'll post as soon as we can. If you want to get your emails in for 950, it's an all email show, put 950 in the subject line. We've got lots of great emails. We could always use more. As we start getting later in the show and I get it drunker and Josh gets tired, or we start to skip some just because we want to make sure we can hit as many as we can. And so make sure you get it. If you still get them in now, you'll still make the show. You still have a chance. So contact at iFanboy.com for that. And then our other shows. This past week, we had our Joker Folie à Deux review. Me and Mike Romo, friend of the show, reviewed that one. That's right behind the show on the feed. This coming week, we're doing our Media Explode show, Megalopolis review. That's going to happen right before the 950th episode. In 2 weeks, Josh is going to have a Talksplode. Josh?
So there's a guy. You may have heard us talking about him recently. He has been a member of the iFan base for a long time. And been, lots of people would do comics. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, this Jordan Thomas guy is doing a lot of comics in a lot of places. And they're pretty good. And so I thought, we should talk to him. And so I had a nice long conversation with him from his Spanish wonderland where he lives.
His Spanish villa?
Yeah, I assume it's a villa and there's just palm trees. And he's so Spanish, he took a nap in the middle of the podcast.
Is he the second iFan base to interview subject member after Tom King?
I believe so. Well, Ibrahim Mustafa was a listener.
He's the third one.
He's an artist. There may have been another one, but yeah. We didn't know Tom before he wrote his book, A Once Crowded Sky, or anything, or started to get, like there was a great Hitler time travel story that he did with Tom Fowler. It was when he started doing comics that I sort of got to know him a little bit. But yeah, this is like one of our kids grows up. I don't mean that to be nearly as awful as
everyone in the Discord is looking forward to that. He's a big presence in the Discord. Yeah. He hangs out there a lot. So if you want to chat with him, he's always on our Patron Discord. But I think everyone there is going to look forward to that as soon as they hear about it.
It's also really interesting because I've talked a lot about how to break into comics for a long time, but the way that I did that is a little outdated. So I was like, how do you do it now? And then we talked about that a bit.
And then the week after that, in 3 weeks, will be our Booksplode review of The Dark Knight Strikes Again. We may be talking a lot about the lack of Klaus Janson in that one. And that's it.
Have you started it?
I have not, because it's 3 weeks away.
Good. You can find our library of 1,408 shows, 1408.
It's accurate.
At iFanboy.com or wherever podcasts are sold. You can follow iFanboy Comics on Instagram to find out what the pick of the week is before the show comes out. Sometimes best of the week in panels. And for an entertaining little clip from the show, which you may not have listened to yet. There's that too. That shows up there. That's marketing, people. You can follow us individually at CS Kilpatrick and J. Flanagan, which is not marketing. That's just...
It's just laziness.
Boring dudes who occasionally post.
Who don't really know what they're doing on the platform.
No, it's just hanging on from the past, really. Like this, I liked this once.
Subscribe to youtube.com/iFanboy, where you'll find all of our old video shows. We post this show there every week as well. You may be listening to it now on YouTube. So thank you if you're there. Smash some buttons. Please consider writing us a review or leaving a star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Pocket Casts or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate that very much. And thank you for listening. My name is Connor.
I'm Josh. You trailed for a second. And
I was going to say something else, but I was going to give you a chance to jump in with your name.
All right. Okay. So I did. Check.
See you next week at 9:50. We hope to see you there live. We're looking forward to it. Until then, talk to you soon.
You're hanging on by a thread there.
I'm hanging on by a thread.
Until then.
The show started weird and ended weird. That's how we do it.
That's good stuff.
Full circle.